to Widowed Too Soon. This is Michelle Bader Ebersole. Mark is not here today, but I'm super excited to have Rob Linger back. Rob, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing actually pretty well.
Yeah, you're a fan favorite, you know,
Oh,
despite the fact that you have an Android.
oh,
Despite that fact, for some
okay.
reason
This
people
interview's
still
over.
like
I'm
you.
sorry. Goodbye.
No, for real. We're glad you're here. I'm so excited to kind of hear what's going on in your life. So let's start. Let's catch up with you because it's been a while since you've been on the podcast. I think there's some big things going on, and you've shared a little bit in our community page. But I'd love for you to share with everyone, like what's going on in your life. What's new?
Actually, nothing. It's really boring life right now. I'm sorry,
What?
but
I feel like
so
there's something.
this year my birthday was on Father's Day, and
Mm.
a friend of mine from high school contacted me about 4 days later and said, "Sorry, I missed your birthday. Happy birthday. Hope it was a good one." So
Mm-hmm.
it was somebody that I don't know why. I think the Lord had been preparing me for this maybe a little bit. I was kind of intrigued with some of her posts or comments that she would make over some of the stuff I had posted about Kathy during her updates that I was giving on Facebook. And I don't know, it was just kind of intriguing at that time, but I didn't know why. I didn't know what was going on. It was just a weird thing. So fast forward about a year and a half later, and she sends me this message, and I'm like, I probably ought to respond so that she thinks that I'm I want to respond, and not just oh
Mm-hmm.
thank you and
Yeah.
we'll talk to you later, bye. And
Yeah.
so that started a series of conversations that went on and on and on, like the
Mm.
Energizer Bunny, and then next thing you know, in the next 10 days, we were on 16 hours worth of phone calls,
Whoa.
and then a Sunday a week and a half ago, we were on a phone call that lasted 9 hours 38
Oh my
minutes.
goodness. Like you're an 18-year-old staying up all night.
She wasn't feeling good that day, so I stayed on the. I called her on the way home from church, and we hung up at about no almost 20 to 10 that night. So,
Wow.
but she was supposed to be in town this coming October, and I was like, you know what? That's a long time to be
Mm-hmm.
holding on, trying to build a relationship, and not even knowing if we're gonna like each other, you know.
Right.
And so I had a vacation this coming week. This week, actually, I'm up at our cottage in Western New York at Chautauqua Lake, and I decided I was going to take the first few days of that, fly down to Florida, and just hang out with her for a few days and see how it works. So
Yeah.
um, we got along great, and I went in with
Mm.
some high expectations, and I came out with even higher expectations of what I've been saying.
Oh, so awesome.
So
And do we get to know her name or do we call her Mystery Girl too?
no, it's
Should we
Nancy.
call her?
Her
Okay,
name's Nancy.
Nancy. All right. Oh, that's so
So
awesome. So tell me, did you have any grief when meeting her? Because I know it feels like strange after you've been married to date again. Like, what was that like for you?
well, let me say this: I've been about, I would say, 3 months after Kathy died, I started praying. I knew that I wasn't ready to date at that point, but I started praying anyways that the Lord will send me a specific lady. Not, and I didn't even know if this person was alive. I just started
Right.
praying for a specific. I figure, I have interest. It would be nice if we had some common interest, and so I just started praying for her, and I asked for two things. I actually asked for a couple things. That one, that she contacted me because I have no idea. I haven't been dating. I haven't asked for a first date in 38 plus years. So,
Right.
um, as far as I'm in a small to medium sized church, there's not a whole lot of opportunities there. So I just asked, Lord, just bring her to me. And I actually got that from Mark. He asked for the
Yeah.
same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so she that when she contacted me, it was, I'm sorry, I left the else out. I was also praying that either if this isn't the Lord's will, that I be content in where I'm at. And so
Yeah.
when we met face to face, and I spent the whole last 4 days, hanging out with her and doing things, and there was no grief at all. I just felt it was of the Lord's
Mm.
hand, Lord's work, and
Wow.
so I did not experience any grief.
Wow. Yeah, everybody's different with that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I
And
wasn't sure how it would work, if there
yeah,
was going to be any.
right. And like so the conversation obviously like really flowed, and like what do you love most about this new relationship? Like what do you like about her,
Well, important thing for me, one of the things I was praying for, was for a widow, someone that understood what I'm going
Right.
through. I can understand what she's been through, and Nancy isn't a widow.
Right.
She was in a difficult situation, difficult marriage, and had to get out. And it was abusive. I'm not going to get it. It's not my story to
Right.
tell, so I'm not going to
Right.
go beyond that. But um, so we started talking, and right away she was so understanding of my situation, and
Mm.
I, I don't know if this is a thing to say or not, but she had a widow's heart. I'll put it that way.
Right.
As far
That's
as
how Joel is. I get it. Yeah.
so,
Mhm. That's
and
awesome.
that's what I right now. That's what I appreciate and love the most. So,
Yeah. Like she's good with you talking about Kathy.
right.
And did they ever know each other?
No, nope.
Mm.
No, this is a girl I went to high school with, and
So cool.
yeah, she ended up. The bad thing was, and it's something that you've got experience in. We're 1,440 miles apart from each other.
Yes, it is
She's in
hard.
Florida, and I'm in Northeast Ohio. So,
But it can work. It
yep.
can
And
work. It's the
and
right
you gave me
person.
some good tips the other day, and I shared those with her, and so, but one of them is not getting an
Yes.
iPhone, just so we can do FaceTime. Sorry,
Oh man.
there are other
Yes,
apps for
but
that.
I want to. Okay, you can talk other ways. Um, but it is important. I know one of the things I told you, and this is a good tip for anyone who's doing long distance, is like we always had the next trip planned before the trip ended because it's like you gotta have, and then I'd have a countdown, and like you've gotta have your next thing. Like otherwise, you're like, when are we seeing each other? So that was something that was huge, and just knowing
So
like God has a plan.
you sent me that text as I was getting on the plane in Sarasota yesterday.
Hmm.
And so I texted her. Basically, I copied your text and sent it to her.
Hmm.
And she said, so I said, what's next? And so
Oh,
we
good.
decided, and I already booked before my connecting flight took off. I
Awesome.
booked flights for the next trip, which is going to be coming up in 5 weeks. So
Awesome. Yeah, you've got to have that. And our average time, yeah, was like 4 to 6 weeks between seeing each other. And that's awesome. I'm so excited. So, on behalf of everyone in Widow Too Soon, congratulations on this new
thank you.
relationship. We pray that God will continue to guide you and show you if this is the person for you.
Yep.
And so that's very exciting. So, I'm going to catch up really quick. So you babbled for 8 minutes. So no, just kidding. Just because you always make fun of us for babbling. So
So now
just
you need to
joking.
go 12.
Now I need to go 12, so we do a full 20 minutes. But no, I haven't been on here in a couple of weeks. It was great to hear Mark and Tina's update last week. I was in Vegas for a conference for Arbonne, my new business that I'm doing, and it was really fun. It was 110 degrees. Like it was like an oven. Like you walk outside, you're melting. But it's fine.
But it's a
Everything
dry
else was
heat.
it was, yeah, it was. It was weird. And we went to the pool one time for 1 hour and you had to be in the water. Otherwise, you were just burning. But I had a great time. Saw some old friends, met some new friends. It was a great time. And let's see, I did have some grief. Now, this was weird. Like, you know how grief could just hit you out of nowhere in a weird way. So I walk in to this big, like a ballroom where they have all this stuff set up, and there's this wall of people. So if you remember right, I was in this company before, and I just came back. So there's this wall of people that like promoted to this level that I was at before, and all their pictures. And I was like, oh, my picture should be there, But I left all these things, but that wasn't really the grief. And then I was like, Luke used to do this with me. Like he was part of the business with me. And I just started crying, right? I'm with this girl who I don't really know because my other friend is busy. And so I'm trying to explain to her my grief. And grief can just hit you at any time. And I had already told her my husband had passed away. It was weird, like I got through it. It was just like you let yourself feel it. I cried, looked weird, like looking at this wall crying. And then I was better. But it brought back grief because he used to like strategize with me with this business and all these things. And so that was interesting. That was probably my only like grief in the last few weeks. We had a big party on 3rd of July. We had 4th of July. I had all these cousins coming. One of my cousins, I think she has 8 kids, 8, 9, I don't know. 7 of them came.
Wow.
I think it's 9. Yeah. And all the way from a 2-week-old baby to her oldest one here was like 16. And so we had so much fun. And then another cousin came and it was just, yeah, great time. But we had like parties every day and very busy. And then my oldest turned 20 and he decided to go bungee jumping.
I saw that.
Yeah, right? That was kind of crazy. So last year he went skydiving and he's like, I want to do bungee jumping. And when they told him, he just went. He didn't even hesitate. They wanted me to go too. I'm like, no, I'm good. I mean, I honestly, like, I could do it. But the older I get, the less I'm like, I don't really want to risk hurting my neck or my back. Or I just don't want to. But Joel said he might go back on his birthday. So maybe I'll have to do it with him. I don't know. But that was cool. And I had like a little bit of grief that morning just thinking about Luke and, the moment we became parents and what that was like and what it would be like if he was here today and all of that stuff. But it wasn't like a ton of grief, but just a little bit here and there. And let's see what else. See, I'm talking quick. I don't really have a lot else. Just been a very busy season. I absolutely love summer. We go swimming a lot. Joel and I paddleboard a lot, and it's just a really fun time to, be out in nature. Still trying to work on my book. I haven't done much with that. I've decided I am going the self-publishing route unless a miracle happens because I keep getting all these rejections, which is fine. But I feel like there's enough widows that I know that would be interested in the book that I don't have to go with an actual publisher. So anyways, that's a little
Just
bit.
put it in the Lord's hands and let him
Exactly.
lead.
Yeah. And I've done that with my other books and I know they've gone where they're supposed to go. And, yeah, so I think that's all my stuff because I'm excited to get into what we have for today. We have a very special guest. We have Ellen. I don't see your name in front of me, so I forgot your last name. Something with a Z. What is your last name?
Ziegler.
Ziegler. There we go.
Yeah.
Ellen Ziegler. We are so excited to have you here today as our special guest. And thank you for being with us. And I'm just so excited to hear your story. So first of all, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well today.
Uh-oh.
From Northeast Ohio, and it's a little cloudy, but it's a good day.
Yes, it's a good day. So we're going to just get to know you better. I know you and Rob already know each other, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to get a chance to get to know you and our audience. So I'd love if you could tell us, like, let's just start with your story. So tell us about your husband and how you met him and all of that.
Sure. After college, I received a job at a local Christian school. And to be a teacher there, I had to join their church.
Okay.
And so Mark was a member of that church, and we met through a mutual friend. She told me, she goes, there's only 2 guys at this church worth dating, and she pointed them both out to me.
Worth dating, love it.
And then she convinced me to go on the bus route with Mark. He drove a bus route for the church. And so we did. And when we got back, he said, hey, how about if we go out to eat? And so I was like, sure. This was September 22nd, and which happens to be his birthday. So we're on our way out to eat, and he goes, oh no, I have to go home. Do you mind going with me? So our first date was for a birthday party with his family, and I met everyone. So that's how we met. Things, progressed pretty quickly because we were a little older, and he was 3 years younger than me. But we really knew within like a month that we were meant for each other. Mm-hmm. And so he proposed that January, and we were married July 12th, 1986. So 9.5 months after our first date,
Wow.
we were married. Uh, you know, we moved for work. We have 5 children now,
Oh, wow.
and um, currently 10, and with number 11 on the way of
Oh my
grandkids.
goodness, that's
So my
amazing.
kids are now between the ages of 29 and 36.
Okay.
Um, but that's, we traveled around to Indiana, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and then eventually moved back to Ohio when he started his own business. And so
Okay.
that's kind of how, a little bit of our backstory.
Yeah, and what was your life like? Like, what did you said he had his own business? What did he do? And did you
He
also work
built,
outside the home, or were you staying home with the
not at
kids?
that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point, I had the kids. I was a
Had
stay-at-home
the
mom.
yeah.
I did start homeschooling
Mm.
with our oldest and ended up homeschooling all my kids up through about fourth grade. But he started his own business with a former his former boss, and they started a company that builds backyard storage buildings
Okay, cool.
called Storage Buildings Unlimited, which Rob has one of those. Uh,
Oh, awesome.
And
and
wait for
yeah,
it.
there's this
What?
is a funny story as we were
Okay,
talking
I'd
about
love
it.
to hear it.
And he asked me what Mark had done. I told him. And then last summer, he texted me. He goes, "Hey, I was looking through Kathy's phone and I found pictures of the barn going up." He sent me those pictures, and to my shock, it was Mark. So
What?
before
Wow.
before Mark and Kathy, either one, were diagnosed, because it was what, 2018, I think, Rob.
Kathy
So
was in 2019 October,
before they were
and the shed was
diagnosed, they met
2017.
2017.
Wow. That's
So
crazy.
isn't it?
That's really
So
crazy.
I was hoping I could find the pictures, but I can't find them right now.
yeah.
That's so
But
cool.
yeah,
Wow. Okay. So he had that
Can I tell
business.
you, if you had an iPhone, it'd be easier to find them because you
Oh,
stop,
texted
good
them to me.
stuff.
stop,
Ellen. Good
stop.
one, Ellen. I
Hey,
love
I
it.
gotta go, guys. It's been nice talking. See you later. Tag team
Seriously. Like 98% of the population probably has
of
iPhones. Like,
of Portland, maybe, or your
yeah.
area.
Like literally
I'm in
everybody.
Ohio.
I hate it when people have Androids and they mess up the group chats. Like my brother, he's stuck on Android, and so it messes up our group chats. And like with iPhone, you can just keep
Mhm,
adding people with Android. You got to redo a whole new chat. It's a whole thing.
mhm.
Anyways, back to what we're talking about.
Yes.
Stop whining, you two.
Well, whatever. Okay, so that's about your life. So tell us, so you're busy with the kids,
hmm
and then he's got his business, and then tell me about what happens like as far as like leading up to the his death and all of that.
Okay. I'm going to kind of backtrack just a little bit
Yes,
because
whatever you want to share.
he ended up having me. I went back to school and
Okay,
I got my master's, and then I started teaching again. And
nice.
I was teaching special education up until 2 years ago.
Oh,
We were both very active in our church, and Mark did a lot of missions. He was actually an ordained missionary, and he would do like
okay.
short-term missions. He worked with a mission board specifically where he was the vice president. And so, our kids were sent to missions. We sent them to Moldova, which is Eastern Europe. Each of our kids spent a summer there. There we
Oh my
go. That's Mark.
God. Okay, that's so awesome.
So, yeah.
Love that.
See how quickly that worked?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. It took me a little while.
Stop.
Anyway, back
So,
to Ellen.
yeah. In April of 2014, Mark was training for a triathlon and
Oh,
was hit
nice.
by a car.
Oh, what?
And so he spent 6 weeks in the hospital, was
Wait, was
in
he?
ICU.
I want to know more about this. I've done a triathlon. Well, I've done a sprint triathlon.
Well, he was
So,
he was um, he was training for the bike part,
yeah. So what?
and he was on the road, and a car didn't see him because of the sun and hit him. He flipped over the
Oh
car.
my goodness.
It was pretty intense. They brought my son home from the military because of it.
Wow.
But he recuperated just fine. But he told me, he goes, I think God was trying to tell me to slow down and to,
Okay.
there were some things that God was teaching him through that, and he listened. And then, we had some years of really horrible times.
Hmm.
The next year, in March of 2015, they told me I had ovarian cancer. Um, they found a tumor. They went in, they took it out. It was the size of a grapefruit. Oh no, I'm
Oh,
sorry, cantaloupe. And when they
what?
tested it inside the
Oh,
operating room, it came back as cancer free. Um, so in less than 5% of women who have all these symptoms that say ovarian cancer, less than 5%, it comes back and it's called Meigs syndrome. It just mimics it, but it's not
wow.
cancer.
Amazing.
So, we had some other financial issues going on through
Right.
that time, and then God started blessing. And, through all of that, we still praise God for all the good things.
Hmm.
We were thankful for our kids. We were thankful for the spouses that they had chosen. At that time, we only had one grandchild, and she was beautiful, still is. And we just followed that. Well, we moved to this house in June of 2019. And then that November, Mark had a broken rib.
Oh,
And we
wow.
went to the ER, and they were like, "Oh, it's just a broken rib, it'll heal," and all of that. A couple months later, he called me, he goes, "I think you need to take me to the ER. Something's just not
Mm.
right." He thought, because during the car accident, we found out he had a blood clotting disorder. And
Oh,
so he was afraid he had a blood clot. So we went, and again, they're like, "No, we think you're just fine. But if you start getting worse, come back." Well, he started getting worse. And thankfully, um, um, my daughter-in-law is an ICU nurse. And so she was over and she was like, "You need to take him to the hospital, take him
hmm.
back." So I went, and that was in January of 2020. And that is when he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. Um,
Wow.
we didn't know anything about it. I had, up to
Mm.
that point, I only knew one other person who had it, and that was a friend from college. Her husband had just been diagnosed a year before. And so Connie was a great help to me during that time, helping me navigate what was going to happen and giving me a picture of how, what was in our future. And we spent some time with them. It was great. It was also during that time I was working on my doctorate and I wanted to quit. I was like, "Nope, I'm done." And
Mm.
Mark convinced me to keep going. And I was in data collection. I only had a semester left to finish. And he convinced me that I was going to finish. He wanted to see me finish. So I did. So in 2020, of July 6th, 2020, I defended my dissertation.
Wow.
And so, and he was here for that and he loved it. During that time, because this kind of helps, I had a friend who gave me a book called When God Doesn't Fix It by Laura
Hmm.
Story.
Yes, I've read that.
And
So good.
yeah, and I couldn't read it at first. It
Hmm.
took a couple months before I could sit down and actually read it, and then I couldn't put it down. And
Hmm.
her song Blessings
Yes,
was
love
one of
this.
those that just really ministered to me during those first few months. Because, like it says, what if the trials of this life are blessings in disguise?
Right.
And so that was, I, we just kept trusting God. Mark would tell everybody, he would acknowledge God every time. He talked to every doctor, every nurse. He would share the gospel. And it was also at this time that my mom's cancer came back too.
Oh no.
And so we're dealing with both my mom and, yeah, and Mark. So we made some changes in how we lived, based on that book, kind of, and we kind of
Yeah.
modified it. One of them was to be intentional and to make memories.
Yes.
And we really started really being intentional about doing things that would create memories with the two of us, with our kids, with our grandkids. Then we found our own support group, or I think you called it your tribe, in
Yeah.
one of the earlier episodes.
Hmm.
And I had four people that I could go to for prayer, for just to vent, to cry, whatever. And one was my sister. One was that girl Connie that I told you about. One was one of my college roommates, and then a colleague at school, and all Christians, and they were praying for me. Mark had his own group. That way, we weren't just burdening each other all the time.
Hmm.
So I mean, we would talk and we would discuss things, but having our own support group was really key in getting through this, I think. And then the last one was to share our story. And so we shared everything online. And Robert, you did the same thing too. And so, and that's kind of how we connected,
Mhm.
um, because we did, it was through our Facebook stories that we had a mutual friend who messaged me on Facebook, and she goes, "You need to meet Rob and Kathy. They're going through the same thing you and Mark are going through." And so that's how we connected. Um,
Mhm.
he after he went through stem cell transplant, he uh, did very, very well. He he went into remission. We had um, a lot of good times during the next couple years. And then in the fall of 22, we uh, started seeing some signs of things that weren't right. Like he started getting a lot of problems with his teeth. Uh, his lab numbers weren't looking quite as good. And so the first week of November, he was up on the roof of a barn and he's feeling pretty good, getting tired earlier than normal, but he was out working, building a barn, and he gets the phone call from our doctor saying that that the cancer had returned.
Mm.
Um, at that time, he went on one final um, hunting trip with his boys, and they went to North Carolina bear hunting, and they all were successful. And so that they talked about that trip, about how good he felt.
Mm.
He felt like he said he was in no pain.
Yeah.
They had the best time from the time they left to the time they got back. They they just had a really good time together, him and the three boys.
Mhm.
So then um, things started going downhill quickly from that point on.
And that seems
His
to be multiple myeloma. When
Yes,
it goes
Mhm.
fast.
yes,
Yeah.
we've noticed that. Um, his actually started presenting as plasma cell leukemia at one point. So
Oh.
they were doing those 4-day treatments where he was in the hospital for 4 days getting chemo. Um, he still was, praising God. He was miserable, but he just kept telling people. Him and my mom would joke about who was going to get to heaven first. Um, and, that's just the way they were. They were both ready to go. Um, and so he tried to take my granddaughter hunting, and he got a hold of me. He goes, "You're going to have to stay with her. I can't do this." And within 2 days, he was in the hospital. And so from
Wow.
Thanksgiving on, he spent more time at the hospital than at home. Um,
Yeah.
a week before Christmas, he his white blood cell count was down so low that I wasn't sure he was going to make it, and I begged God to give us one more Christmas. And over the
Yeah.
next couple of days, he came out of it, and he told me later, he goes, "I thought I was dying." He thought that was it. And I feel like God answered my prayer for that one, because I just
Yeah.
begged and begged to get one more Christmas. The whole family was going to be in. It would be great to have, all the kids, because my girls live out of state. So
Mhm.
in March, both Mark and Mom ended up in the hospital. They put my mom on hospice, and he was at Akron, um, the hospital in Akron, and they wanted him transferred up to Cleveland Clinic, which is an hour away from me. And so I stayed up there. I was fortunate. There's a place there called Hope Lodge that is for that. If you have a cancer patient who's going through some sort of transplant, they put you up there. And so
Oh.
it's free. It was so
Wow.
nice. It
That's so
was
nice.
a blessing.
Yeah.
And I was able to stay there for at least a week because they had an opening for a week. Um, his biggest concern at that point was that the youngest two grandkids, which one had just turned one and the other one was almost a year old. And he's like, "They'll never remember me." And that just really bothered
Oh.
him.
Yeah.
And somebody started talking to him, and they said, maybe you're looking at this wrong. Maybe you're not here for the girls, but maybe the girls are here for you. And that changed his whole mindset. And he was, feeling better about leaving and not being able to watch the grandkids grow.
Right.
So that was a kind of a turning point in his attitude towards everything too. So he started getting T-cell therapy. They thought that this was like a last ditch effort, and but the toxicity started getting very bad. Got to the point where he was incoherent at times. He couldn't remember. They would ask him questions, and some days he could get them, and some days he couldn't. And it just seemed to be getting worse. But on April 8th, my son came in, and Mark was in and out at this point, and he came up and he goes, "Dad, because I have a question for you." He goes, "John Mark is looking into going, well, they are now, they're going into missions." But he asked his dad, he goes, how do I know what God's will is? And I've never heard my husband say this before, so it was pretty profound. He goes, "It's really easy. Proverbs 3:6. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy paths." And then he looked at John Mark and he says, "Stay on your side of the verse." And that has become all my kids. They use that all the time now.
Wow.
And so that was probably the last day that he was real coherent.
I like
And
that.
then,
Stay on your side of the verse.
I
That's
know.
that's
yes,
clear and to the point.
actually, the kids wanted that on the tombstones. That's what's on his tombstone is
Wow.
Proverbs 3:6. Stay on your side of the verse. And so
The
they
meaning,
said that's
like,
just
I know you.
you. The first half, says, "In all thy ways acknowledge him." He goes,
That's
"That's
our
what
part
is
too.
your part.
Yeah.
That's your part. So stay there. God will guide you." And
So good.
John Mark has followed that, and God has closed doors, opened doors, and everything. And now um, they're going to be leaving for Africa in the next couple years. So, and
Amazing.
the fun part about that is it's where my husband used to minister. It was in a country in Africa called Malawi, and so he's following in his dad's footsteps.
Wow.
So,
I love that he left them with that. That's amazing.
yeah. So then a couple days later, they called me in the morning and told me that they needed to put him on a ventilator.
Mm,
And I think in my heart at that point,
yeah.
I knew he was never going to get off. Um, but I told him they could. And I called my daughter-in-law and she met me at the hospital. Like I said, she's an ICU nurse. And so she kind of helped me, like, this is what you want to listen for. When you start hearing these things,
Right.
then we'll have another discussion. But at that point, she goes, he might be able to come off of this. Let's do it. She called my daughters, told them, you know what? It may not be a problem. He may get better, but if I were you, I'd come. So
Yeah.
my girls came in, and so they stayed with me up in Cleveland. And then by the 14th, he was on dialysis. He wasn't able to be taken off the vent. And I get a phone call from my sister telling me that it doesn't look like mom's going to make it. And
Oh
I'm
my
looking at
goodness.
Mark isn't going to make it.
What?
My mom isn't. And once again, I remember just sitting in a windowsill at the hospital and reading my Bible and tears streaming down my eyes. And I'm begging God, please, just not on the same day. My mom had lost her mom and my husband 10 days apart. So the person that I needed to talk to the most about
Right.
how to deal with this isn't able.
Oh,
Um, some things happened that day that made it obvious that he wasn't going to get better, and we had already talked about what he wanted. And so I talked to the doctor, had Miranda talk to the doctor, and he we made the decision that we were going to take him off the life support, and called all the kids in. My oldest granddaughter was there. Uh, she was 12 at the time. She's 13 now. And we just sat there. We had songs playing. And the very first song, when everybody was together, was the song Softly and Tenderly, and the hymn. And at the chorus, it says, "Come home."
oh wow.
And so that was kind of, kind of helped us all. And so he passed away early in the morning on April 15th. Um, the thing is, they had a work day scheduled here at my house because I have like 5 acres. And since Mark wouldn't be able to get some of the things done that he needed done, they had already planned one.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came home, there was probably 40 people
Wow.
taking care of the yard, cutting down trees, weeding gardens, fixing fences because I have cows.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted cows. He always loved cows, so I still have them. Um, and it was kind of good because I had everybody here
Yeah.
and those who were closest to me, and we could, uh, we could mourn together, we could grieve together, and yet we had some praise time too
Mm-hmm.
during that time. Um, then the next day, I went to see my mom, and when I walked in, she opened her eyes. She hadn't talked to anybody since Saturday, I think. And as soon as she saw me, she looked me in the eyes and she said, "How's Mark?"
Oh.
And I looked at her and I said, "Well, Mom, he's with Jesus." And she shook her head, and then she looked at me and she goes, "How are you?"
Wow.
And I said, "Mom, I'll be fine. I will be fine." And she closed her eyes, and that's the last that she talked to anyone, and she passed
Wow.
Wow.
away the next day. So they were 2 days apart.
Oh my goodness.
So here we are planning two separate funerals. You know, I mean, and I'll be honest, I still tell people I don't think I've grieved for my mom as much
Right.
as I probably would have. I'm
Right.
still kind of dealing with that grief,
Mm-hmm.
because the grief of, my husband was greater at that point. My mom was 87 years old, and, she'd had a long life and she was ready to go home to see my dad. So,
Yeah.
um, you go to the calling hours. There were so many people there. I I stood there and talked to so many people, and then this one guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, do you know who I am?" And it was Rob.
Oh.
Um, he showed up. That was the first time we'd met, even though we'd been communicating,
Yeah.
you know, uh, since that time. And it was just so good to, to see him there and to, to know that somebody who knew what I was going through was there. And Rob, we've talked about it. I just appreciate your friendship so much because it's been a big help.
Mm.
Thank
Um,
you.
the,
You've been a big
so
help too. So
yeah, we helped each other. Uh,
yes.
the interesting part about Mark's funeral, though, is we decided to live stream it, and people from Australia, Malawi, um,
Wow.
Moldova, people across the United States watched it. And but it was a little different because Mark had
It
always
was
told me he
very
wanted
different.
to. What's that?
I said it was very different.
It was very different. Mark always said he wanted to speak at his own funeral. So about a year and a half
Wow.
before he passed, he made a recording.
Whoa.
So I had the kids listen to it. I said, "What do you think?" And they were all like, "We have to do it." And so um, he was pretty long-winded. He I always warned him. He goes, "I have some good jokes in here," and I said, "Well, if they're not good, just remember I have the remote control and I can mute you at any time." But he
Wow.
did. He had people laughing, but I mean, everybody was kind of shocked at first. But then it was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that's Mark," but so.
Wow.
But
Wow.
his goal was to give the gospel one more time.
Oh, good for him.
And so he had some colleagues there, the people he worked with that weren't Christians, so they were able to hear the gospel. And we know some people who made some changes in their life due to this as
Mm.
well. So that was, um, that was different.
Yeah,
But,
I can imagine.
but it's
Ellen
something that,
Ellen
yeah.
told me about that beforehand, and I watched the live stream, and even though I knew it was coming, I didn't know it was coming. It was just like
Yeah.
it was just so unusual and
Mhm.
so unique, but it was a very
Yeah.
unique twist.
Well, I don't know if this part was on the live stream, but about 5 minutes before the service started, he had another little video, and my kids told me they had to do it. And he pops up on the screen and he says, "Can everybody please find their seats? It's about time to start." And
Oh my goodness.
people started laughing because he was a jokester. He was very bold. He'd tell you what he thought, but he
Yeah.
also, he had a great sense of humor, and but it's memorable and it was good. So,
Wow. That is, oh, wow. So cool. I love that. So then what was life like after that? You have the service. I mean, and your mom's too. Like what was life
mhm.
like at that moment for you? I can
uh,
only imagine.
it was it was very chaotic, and so
Uh-huh.
I feel like I didn't get to even. I mean, there was so much going on that for probably 3 weeks, nothing really set in yet. It just didn't because we were, trying to handle both situations. And um, we buried Mark. We have a property about an hour and a half from here where we do hunting, and he wanted buried down there. So the burial was a couple days after the service. So we had all of that. My girls had already planned on coming and staying with me because if things would have gone well with the T cell therapy, and I wanted to go back to work, so they were going to help me and stay at home. So they decided they'd just stay with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was so I really wasn't alone for probably almost a month.
Mm-hmm.
My mother-in-law does live with me,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean I did have that. But as far as like having lots of people around and grandkids and all that,
Yeah.
um, and my kids, my one son lives real close, and he was coming over every day just to kind of check on us to make sure we were
Yeah.
okay. Um, I went back to work for the last couple weeks of school just because I needed to get out of the
Yeah.
house.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that church was probably the hardest place to go.
Okay.
And that was because that's what we did together.
Yeah.
And school was easier. It was an outlet for me. So I had that. So once summer hit, that's when I think everything really started
Yeah.
hitting.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids kept me busy. They kept asking me to babysit. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I had a lot of kids.
Yeah.
But those times alone,
Yeah.
um, I actually spent a lot of time with our pastor. He is also a widow. His wife passed away about 9 years ago, and so uh, we had some really good conversations.
Yeah.
And Mark was one of his best friends, so
Yeah.
he was hurting as well. But it brought Mark's passing brought up a lot of grief for him as
Yeah.
well.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so, but it was really good to have him around that I could talk to. And it took me a little bit trying to figure out, Mark always did the bills. So now here I
Right.
am trying to figure all that out.
Yep.
Um, Thankful for a son who's an accountant that helped me through
Oh,
that.
nice.
Um, I tried to make plans as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And for, anniversaries, I found out birthdays were probably the hardest, not just his, but mine as well. And so,
Mm.
um, you asked about a verse earlier,
Yeah.
and I wanted to share one. One verse that really helped me up a lot through the last bit, and also for those first few months, was Psalm 61:2, and it says, "From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I." And I love that God used the word overwhelmed,
Mm.
and
So
because
good.
that's really how I felt, was
Yeah.
overwhelmed with so much going on, and having to deal with all the things that you have to deal with after a person passes away, and
But you
um,
had it doubled.
Yeah.
yes, and I was
I, I
also, yeah.
I remember those texts that you would send me about that, and I was like, "Holy
Mhm.
cow!"
So hard.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, trying to do it for both Mark and for my mom. My
Mm.
one sister did most of it, but I was on her will as an executor, so I had to help with some of that, and signatures and things like that. It was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did you, how did you get through it? You're talking about that verse. Like, what else did you have? Did you have like a good community around you? What are some of the things that helped you? Did you get a new hobby? Like, what helped you?
Um, I don't have time for hobbies. I'm working two
Yeah.
jobs.
Oh, okay.
So,
That keeps you busy.
yeah, because I teach middle school during the school
Oh,
year, but then I'm also a professor for Liberty University, and that's year
wow.
round.
Okay,
So,
you don't have time for new hobbies.
not right now. I
Yeah.
mean, I still kept up with, because we hunted together. My family was the
Oh,
hunters.
okay.
So I went out this year and I got a good trophy, and it was pretty. That brought some grief because Mark and
Yeah,
I hunted together.
right?
But yes, I have great community. I will say my kids in particular, I can't say enough about them.
Oh.
Um, like I said, the three boys live here,
Mm-hmm.
and so they and their wives have just done so much,
That's
and
awesome.
they take care of the yard, which is great because I have
Yes.
5 acres, and
Yes.
my one daughter-in-law loves to mow. So
Perfect.
she goes, "Can you watch the baby?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll watch the
Yeah.
baby," and she'll go mow. So one thing somebody did, I had I think it was my daughter-in-law, gave me a list of verses on grief.
Mm,
And you were supposed to write out one verse a day. Just
mhm.
write it, on a piece of paper, and you write until you come to a punctuation mark and then start the next line. And it was
Okay.
a 30-day challenge. And so I did that because I felt like at the very beginning, I couldn't read a lot. I mean, my
Mhm.
mind was in so many different
Yeah.
places that
Uh-huh.
only being able to read one or two verses, and that helps keep me staying in God's word
Mhm.
through that time. And then I found out that the Psalms were easy to read.
Yeah.
And then by the time I got through all of that, then things started getting easier to stay in the
Mhm.
Word. But yeah, I also went to Grief Share, and
Oh, yeah.
was a that was very helpful.
Right.
And I would suggest that for anyone to be able to find a Grief Share for that. So,
That's
but I
good.
think another one of the hardest parts was just not having anyone to discuss things with.
Yes.
When you're making those decisions, and these are things we did together, and now trying to make that decision on my own sometimes
Oh,
feels,
yeah.
a little hard.
Yeah, so that's actually the question I was going to ask you. What's the most challenging thing about being widowed? Would you say that's
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Hmm.
You just, not having that person to
Right.
communicate with and to talk
Yep.
to make those decisions. And, you know, I never did taxes before.
Right.
He
I
took
know.
care of all
That was
that.
the new thing for me too.
Right. So that was, and him passing away on April 15th,
Oh
we had
my
to put in
goodness.
an extension because, and so I had to do that year all by myself as well.
Oh,
He
wow.
thankfully he had everything pretty much put together, but then he
Okay.
got so sick that was the
Right.
last thing on my mind. And
Right.
thankfully our accountant knew what was going on, so she put in the extension for me. But yeah,
Wow.
that was tough.
Yeah, it's like you have to learn to trust yourself that you can do these things. And then I found it so
Yes.
empowering when I could do them. I'm like, oh, I can do taxes,
Oh,
I can do bills, I can do anything, you know? It's kind of a
now
good
I can.
feeling,
Yeah.
right? It's like you
Right.
had it within you this whole time, but you didn't have to do it because you had someone to do it. But then when you
Right.
have to do it, you learn,
Hmm.
you figure it out. So that's awesome. Very
It
good.
was
Yeah.
interesting when you were talking about no one to communicate with and just to
Hmm.
just to talk with. That's I joke. This really happened a few times. I would come home from work and Kathy had retired a year and a half or so, a year before she died, and she missed that adult time with other adults at school.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
she was a high school math teacher, but she always was talking with other teachers and all. So
Right.
I came
Absolutely.
home from work one day. I opened the garage door coming in from the garage to the house, and before I even had the door closed, she was talking to me.
Mm.
And I got home at about 5:15. She continued talking until 7:30, and that's when she stopped. She goes, "I never asked, how was your day?" I just looked at her and said, "Fine." And she
Right.
said, "Good." And she continued talking.
Oh my goodness.
But,
Yes.
that's one of the things I miss the most right now are
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, what would you say? What would be your advice to a new widow? Like, I know you're still pretty new, but like a brand new first
Yeah.
few months.
I have a couple things. First is don't be afraid to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Oh,
that's
good.
hard.
Yeah.
it's always hard to ask, because you don't want to bother people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but sometimes even asking somebody at the church to kind of put something out there to see who can help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been good. I mean, I have a text with my three boys on it. If they can't do it, then we branch out. But I'm
Right.
not afraid to start, to ask for help anymore.
That's so
That was
good.
hard.
Great advice.
Um, I think being in God's Word really does help. And
Yeah.
like I said, if it's only a verse or two at the beginning, um, it's what got me through.
Yeah.
That I listen to a lot of music. Um, when I first started listening to this podcast, I don't think I was quite as crazy as Rob, but I listened to it every day until I caught up.
Wow.
Um, and, but it was, that was really good. And then the other one I was thinking of today was get up, make your bed, get dressed, and
Yeah.
find some things to do for the day.
That's good.
It's
Yeah.
easy
Stay
to
busy.
stay in bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would get up and I purposely made my bed every day
Yeah.
and got dressed.
Mm-hmm.
And especially during the summer because it was easier for me just to kind of,
Right.
be lazy during the summer. But I think, I had plans for all last summer. I had different things to do. I made trips to see my girls, um, help them with their kids and just spent like a week in Pennsylvania and did a lot of fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped me get by. And then I also found a community.
Yeah.
Um, and the people that were in my community before my group, they're still there and they still contact me. But then I met some other people and I met other people who were some other women who were widows. One who's a young widow that was a colleague at school. My cousin lost her husband 2 months after
Mm.
Mark passed away. That was the first funeral I went to
Oh,
afterwards.
that's so hard. Yeah.
That kind of thing. So to share with them and be able to talk to them was good. But to have
Mhm.
some purpose in my life, I think that's what really helped me through.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice because you've got to have something that, like, what's my goal today? What's my,
Hmm.
just so you have some point. So, what I see that you did is you kept living, you kept doing
Yes.
fun things and challenging yourself and seeing your grandkids and just all of this
Hmm.
stuff.
And let's
So
face
what?
it, that one bit of advice she gave was probably the best.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to this podcast.
Oh, that, yeah, of course.
Right?
Yes, yes. So I didn't warn you about this question. What? So if you don't like it, we'll take it out. Um,
Uh-oh.
Okay.
what are your thoughts about dating again?
That's an interesting one because Mark and I talked about it.
Oh, really? Wow.
So yeah, and he's like, "You're still young."
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I totally want you to know, I want you to date. I would love to see you. I
Oh,
would be happy if you would get married. So that's, you know, I'm kind of like, just God, if you want me to get married, you're gonna have to bring somebody to me.
yep.
Um, I'm like you, Rob. If somebody with some of the interests that I have would be good. I'm just waiting right now. And but yeah, that is. I feel like I have the permission.
That's
I don't have to
amazing.
feel like I'm doing anything wrong
Right.
because.
That's
But he,
a
we
gift.
talked about a lot of things like that when we knew that he wasn't. Even when he
Yeah.
was in remission, they told him he'd probably only have no more than 10 years, anyways, if he had. But his was aggressive and it didn't last that. Didn't get that time. But so we talked a lot about that.
Right. I think that's beautiful. It's such a gift because I've had where there's people where they've, the husband had actually said, don't marry again, and like how hard that is. Or in my case,
Mm,
we never talked about it because I believe it was too hard for him to even think about it. So to have that gift of him already saying, because I went through
hmm.
that, like, oh, I don't know what Luke would think. And like, it was so hard.
Yeah.
And so I love that you have that gift. And listeners, if you
Yes.
didn't have that blessing, just know it's okay. Like, it's okay to date again. You still love your late spouse. Like, I'm married again and have pictures of Luke all over my house and talk about him.
Mm,
You
And
know,
Kathy would joke. This is before she was diagnosed, but she would joke, "If I ever die before you, you can't remarry because you already found the best."
But yeah, you
So
know, just joking. Yeah.
well, yeah, it was a joke, but like you, Michelle, we never talked about it when she was diagnosed. It was interesting with Kathy. She had a strong faith. She was afraid of death, not afraid of dying. She was afraid of death. She thought that death was
Mm,
going to be very painful,
mm,
and so she did not want to address anything around her death, and that
right.
Mhm.
included her dying and me possibly meeting somebody else. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Which, yeah, Mark was just the opposite. He talked about it all the time.
I mean,
Right.
You
come
know,
on,
he would,
he spoke,
yeah,
he recorded something for his own funeral.
Right. He was
I
thinking of
know,
everything.
right?
That's yeah, that's
Exactly.
such a gift. So,
Yeah.
as we wrap it up, tell us, what is life like right now? Like, what does your life look like day to day, and maybe what are some things that bring you joy?
Well, first of all, the grandkids bring me a lot of
Yes,
joy.
I would imagine.
Um, and currently, my one son, John Mark, is living, him and his wife and their kids are living here temporarily until they leave for Africa
Mm,
to be missionaries. So that's brought a lot of joy. Just seeing my kids all in church, seeing my grandkids in church. Those are some of the things that, just bless me so much. I right now, like I said, I'm working two jobs, and I'm enjoying my last few years of teaching before I retire.
yeah.
And but I'll keep going with Liberty as long as I can,
Mm,
and it keeps me busy. And I've made some wonderful friends through Liberty. Some
right.
of my students, because I'm a doctoral chair, so I'm helping people get through their dissertations.
Wow.
And so these are adults that I'm working
Yeah.
with, and some of them have become very close friends,
Right.
and we stay connected afterwards. And so I love my job. Liberty has been great for me when we were going through all of this. All the professors that I was working with offered to help me out with my students and do any reviews that they needed and that kind of thing, and just they were wonderful.
Oh, that's
And so I
awesome.
can't, it's a blessing to work there.
Hmm.
So I'm just going on right now with, my two jobs.
Yeah, it's a lot.
We have the vacation home down a little bit south of here, and I was just there over the weekend, enjoyed that. Every Sunday we have the first Sunday of the month we have the family over, and we have the first Sunday of the month dinner right after church, and so I get to see all the kids that are in town um, show up, and we get to spend
Awesome.
time together. The cousins get to play. And this past week, my one daughter couldn't come, so we had four of my kids and seven grandkids here.
Wow.
And they had so much fun. We were celebrating birthdays. My
Yeah.
youngest granddaughter was actually born on my mom's birthday. So my mom got to see her, and, it
Oh,
was her last birthday. And so that's a day that could be sad, but now we have some
right.
joy in seeing this new young life.
Right.
So
Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome. You have such a like beautiful joy about you. I love that I can see that Christ is your strength and he shines through you,
absolutely.
in
Hmm.
your life. And so I don't know how people do it without Jesus. Like, I don't know how you
I
get
don't
through
either.
this. And that's
I
the
don't know.
original reason Mark and I decided to start the podcast is because we saw all these people in these widow groups and we're like, they need Jesus. Like, we need to
Hmm.
point them to Jesus because I can only imagine like how this would feel if you had no hope. It was just like, okay, they're gone and I don't know what happened to them and I don't know what I'm doing, and it's just such a hard place to be. So, thank you for sharing your story. Rob, did you have any other questions for Ellen?
No, it just kind of, there's so many things, similarities because Kathy and
Mhm.
Mark were fighting the same disease.
Right.
Hmm.
They they were basically on the same time frame. Um, even going back to the little stupid thing like we were talking, Mark built our shed and we didn't even know
Mhm.
Mark and Ellen, and Mark and Kathy, I was at work when the shed was built. Kathy was a school teacher. It was during the summer. She was off and she was there talking with Mark. And
Crazy.
there are just so
Right.
many crazy things the Lord put. And then our mutual friend, who I went to high school with, she went to college with,
Mm.
Hmm.
put us in touch. And you know, I, Ellen provided a lot of help for me. I'm hoping I was able to help her out a little bit. And
Sure were.
it was just, I remember those especially the last few days, and I was afraid to text you what I really thought was happening at the time.
Hmm.
But I had seen it with Kathy. I had seen the downfall and the turn for the worse. And I think I said to my daughter that, I'm just afraid that Mark is on his last days here, and I'm afraid to,
Hmm.
I don't want to say that to Ellen, but
Hmm.
yeah, still, it was just, I'm glad we were able to at least connect and help each
Yeah.
other out through that. And then when you started talking about your mom just passed as well, and that's where I was just like, that's next level
Hmm.
that I have no experience with.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
It's tough.
Yeah, very tough. But you have brought hope to so many just with your story and sharing it. So thank you for having the courage to do that.
You're welcome.
Rob, would you end us in prayer?
sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Lord, I want to just thank you right now for Ellen and just for
Hmm.
Mark and just for their testimony, their lives, Lord. I want to just thank you for Ellen being able to come on today and just give her story to us, Lord. I want to thank you for that, Lord. I just want to pray that you'll continue to be with Ellen and all of us, Lord, as grief hits us at the worst times and at the most unusual times, it seems, Lord. I just want to pray that we'll continually keep our eyes on you during those times, Lord, when grief does hit. So, Lord, I just want to pray that you'll be with Ellen as her life goes on from this point, Lord. I just want to ask that you'll just guide her life, Lord, through this time. I ask this now in your son's name. Amen.
Amen. Well, if you liked this podcast, give us a little bing, 5
Bing,
stars
bing, bing,
on.
bing, 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 bing.
Thank you. You know exactly what to do. On Apple Podcasts.
Notice
Did
that
you
was
get that?
5.
Oh, okay, good. You got 5. Apple Podcasts, where most of you listen because you have an iPhone, or on Spotify if you don't have an
That's
iPhone.
a low
Or,
shot.
well, actually, Spotify is great because you can see us on video. So, there's that. Someday we'll be back. I used to put them on YouTube. I just haven't in a long time. But there are some videos there on YouTube. But the best place is just to go to Spotify because you'll see us on there. Anyways, take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Share it with somebody. That would be awesome. If you
Well,
haven't
what's
joined us.
funny? YouTube is owned by Google, who owns Android. So
Oh, funny. I had to get that in there. Anyways, if you haven't joined our Widow Too Soon community page, make sure you do that. Links below. That's the best one, I feel, because people can post themselves. It's not just us posting. We'd love to have you as part of that, where you can be with people who get it, and we try to keep it a safe community. I check through the profiles as they request. There's been like one, I think, that got through that there was a few complaints I had to go block that wasn't really widowed, or he was just trying to hit on people. I don't know. So if you see one of those, let me know. But we try to keep it a safe place that you can come and ask for prayer or post what's going on in your life, or basically anything you want just to feel supported. We'd love to have you there. So I think that's all we've got for you today. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we will talk to you next time.
bye.
Bye.
I